Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.
Yes, indeed. Rugby on Off the Ball is brought to you by Vodafone, the main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to Team of Us. And in the words of Adam and Paul, there's been an awful lot of weather lately, but rugby's been surviving very well. And 3 massive games for the Irish provinces this weekend, one of which, my guest, Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent, is going to be at. You're flying out to see Munster on their travels.
Yeah, Munster in Northampton on Sunday. Yeah, it's an early kick-off, so flying out tomorrow to leave nothing for chance. I know even some journalists who were going over to cover Leinster in Le Havre last weekend got caught by cancelled flights as well, so leaving nothing to chance getting over there early. So yeah, fingers crossed. I've never been over to Franklin's Gardens actually. It's been on the list. It's one of those kind of old school English venues, so looking forward to it. I
got a text from your erstwhile colleague Rory O'Connor yesterday, and he's just like, Leinster in the match tomorrow night, this is going to be an absolute bloodbath, and this is Leinster playing at 8 o'clock this evening, which has been the subject of some conversation, the Gloucester game, because Gloucester are coming over here. This is a Pool A game. Leinster, obviously one of the strong favourites to win the competition. Gloucester have sort of given up on this game basically, and I'm wondering, you're 2 games into the pool stages and you've basically a complete non-event. And I know Leo Cullen has spoken about the fact that, well, we can only beat what's in front of us. There's something not right about this in terms of the competition. I see one of the papers today was calling it the Champions Cup or something like that it's kind of lost its lustre. What's your take on it?
Oh, it's a terrible look for the competition. There's no doubt about it. This is the problem with the new format that the EPC or the tournament organisers have brought in. It's a bad look for the competition. I know, Gloucester are entitled to do what they like, but in my opinion, it's a very bad look for the club. This is a team who won their first game last weekend and got a bonus point, so they're in good form. It's not like, they feel like they're already out of the competition. They're 4th in the Premiership. You're looking at it going one of the Premiership top flyers against, the team at top of the URC, except what you're getting is a second, if not third string Gloucester team coming over. And it sure changes, I think, everyone involved. I mean, can you imagine being a Gloucester supporter and paying to come over to Dublin this time of year?
We'll say, yeah,
coming over to Dublin this time of year, this close to Christmas, and you're getting a scratch team like that. That's just not good enough. I just think it sends a bad attitude to the squad, the players within the club. It's so defeatist to think that, we're not going to get anything in Dublin, which in reality they probably won't. But I just think the mentality around it is so weak. But it is a consequence of the format that we're living in, Johnny, and that's just the reality of it. I think EPCR, I think most fans, if you did a straw poll, would want to go back to the old format in a heartbeat of having the pools with 4 teams in each. But it's just, it's made it unnecessarily convoluted, and this is what's happening. Gloucester are obviously going, okay, well, we're not going to get anything out of this game, even if we do send our first team. They've got a big game, I think it's against Leinster on Christmas Eve next week, which in the Premiership, which they're prioritising. That's fine, but there's loads of reasons why they can't do both. You know what I mean? There's no relegation in the Premiership this year. Not that Gloucester would be involved in that. Like I said, they're 4th, but there's no jeopardy involved in the Premiership this year. There's 2 less teams, with Worcester and Wasps having gone to the wall. And what's to say they couldn't have come over here and caused an upset against Leinster, and what would that do for their confidence? So they're banking on getting something at Kingsholm against Leinster after Christmas, which in my mind is no guarantee either, but particularly with how well Leinster are playing. So it's a bad look, but I think the tournament organisers are going to have to go back to drawing board and look.
Wait, is that possible?
Of course it is, yeah. Obviously not going to happen now, but I think going forward, there's so much, rugby is in flux so much because there's talks of the World League coming in terms of getting the North and the South and aligning the global calendars. But how long have we been talking about that, and we're still nowhere along the line? But in the midst of it all, I think what has been the best club competition in the world has been messed up really by the format. When it comes down to the last 16 and the quarterfinals in particular, you are still going to have the best teams involved. But for a competition with such illustrious history, it's a shame that almost the pool stages are written off and you're just waiting for the knockout stages. Because back in the day, when the tournament was at its heights, the pool stages were unbelievable. Fans got to go on the away trips. You had the back-to-back dates, and whereas now it's just you have teams like Gloucester who have a proud history as well. You think back to the Miracle match in Thomond Park and stuff, and it's just a bad look all around. Everyone's getting shortchanged that's involved.
And just briefly on Leinster, how much of a stage Stadium was the Racing win.
Oh, it's massive, yeah. Like, absolutely massive. Like, they're in such a fortunate position that even, you know, tonight, like, Johnny Sexton is back fit, but like he's only on the bench because Ross Byrne is playing well. They didn't have to rush Tyg Furlong back because Michael Alatoa is playing so well. So, yeah, like, it was, like, Racing were really poor, but Leinster were awesome. And I think even before you saw the team that Gloucester were sending over, you would have been banking, Leinster would have been banking on getting 5 points. And I think, you know, that's probably going to be a given tonight. But Leo Cullen is right, like, they can only beat what's in front of them, but Leinster were burnt last year by having to give a walk over to Montpellier, and you know, that cost them having to go away in the knockout stages to Welford Road against Leicester. But Leinster are looking at the very real possibility of only having to travel away once more in the competition from now until potentially reaching the final, and that game would be in Kingsholm, because if Leinster finishes top seeds, they'll be at home in the last 16, they'll be at home in the quarter final, they'll be at home in the semi-final, and of course the Champions Cup final next year is going to be on at the Aviva Stadium. So that's enough carrot for Leinster, you know, to keep focused on themselves. I doubt there'll be any complacency, and if anything, they'll probably want to send out another statement that why it's so wrong, because Montpellier did the same last year in the RDS. They sent over a scratch team and Leinster put 89 points in them. So, like, that's kind of where Leinster's mindset is. It wouldn't be surprised if they rack up a big score again tonight. Yeah,
and as Cian mentioned, he's off to flying via Birmingham to the Northampton Munster game, and this is a fascinating game in the shape of the context of the group. Obviously, you might argue a must-win game for both. Conor Murray starting for Munster. Graham Roundtree's made 4 changes, and it's Murray's first start for 6 weeks. And Joey Carberry, who impressed last week, will be joined by Jack Crowley's coming in for Royce Canal inside centre. Keith Earl is on the left wing as well. He's back from injury as well. And we just spoke pre-show about the change in the Munster DNA, and I was going back to that game between Munster and Ulster maybe a month ago, and the progress both have made since. Ulster won that day, but Munster have actually kicked on, and you can see every week now that there's a style coming here.
Yeah, like this team selection for Sunday's game, if ever there was proof that Munster are headed in a new direction, a more expansive style of play, this is it. I mean, selecting Jack Crowley at 12, it simply wouldn't have happened under Johan van Graan, particularly for such a huge game. You look at that Munster team now with Conor Murray coming back in, Joey Carberry's been playing really well over the last few games. You've now got playmakers all across the back line. So Jack Crowley came off the bench last week against Toulouse and came on at 12. Obviously he's a 10. That's where he made his debut for Ireland last month, and that's where he's been playing the majority of his rugby, but he's proven to be versatile. He can play at fullback as well. So he came off the bench at 12 last week, and Munster's attack looked far more fluid. He linked brilliantly with Joey Carberry. It takes a lot of pressure off Joey Carberry as well. No different to when Robbie Henshaw is playing outside Johnny Sexton for Leinster in Ireland.
And could this bring Carberry to, I guess, show what people would say he was long capable of, but maybe has been able to show for Munster?
Yeah, because I think there's always been a lot of responsibility because of maybe the lack of a playmaker outside of him. As good as Damien Dialende was for Munster as a 12, he wasn't that natural playmaker. He was more of a guy who was going to get you over the gain line. But now you've got a guy who's equally comfortable stepping up as first receiver and having a two-sided attack, and that's something Munster have really lacked over the last few years. And then you look outside Jack Crowley, you've got Antoine Frisch, who's been a really, really shrewd signing by Munster. Okay, he had a tough enough outing against Toulouse last weekend, but he's been really impressive by and large in the bits that we've seen. He's also very, very comfortable on the ball. You've got Keith Earls coming back in, who's also comfortable coming off his wing, and Mike Haley at fullback, who looks far more... He was actually speaking during the week to us at the press conference. Like, he's enjoying his rugby a lot more now, because when your game plan isn't revolved around a kick heavy approach like the South Africans do, and your back three are being asked to chase balls, box kicks all day, of course when you flip that and you're trying to get the ball into hands, more players are going to be enjoying that. So I think that's being reflective in what we've seen. Okay, the results all haven't been great, but they did get a losing bonus point last week. There's no shame in losing to Toulouse. Like, they're arguably there's 4 teams maybe who can realistically win the Champions Cup this season, you'd say, and they're certainly one of them. So it probably just showed where Munster are. Losing at home in the past would have been unforgivable in the Champions Cup, but like, people have to stop comparing or looking at Munster through the prism of the glory days, because they're so far in the past that you need to move on. So
it does seem like the fans are kind of cognizant of that as well, that they are giving
absolutely, and I think the fans are going to be way more patient now, because they're seeing a commitment to the new style of play that they're trying to play, because the game has moved on. Like, we saw that in the Lions tour last year as well. Like, I mean, if you want to beat these these teams. You saw it in, actually go even more recently, you saw it for Ireland against South Africa last month. Trying to think your way out of trouble against the bigger teams rather than trying to take them on is the way to go. So I think the fans are going to be much more encouraged by seeing a commitment to that, because one of the biggest criticisms I would have had under Johan van Graan and Stephen Larkin was that Munster were well capable of pulling out a good attacking performance, but the following week when the going got tough against a bigger team, they reverted to type, and that was so frustrating, because you saw it on a consistent basis over a period of a few years, whereas now younger players are starting to be trusted more. They're not reverting to type as much, and there's more of a mixture and a variety in terms of their play. So I think most Munster fans are perfectly have to be patient, as much as they will be frustrated at having to have another season of transition.
This is a tough one to call, is it?
Yeah, it's a tight game, but I think Munster should be quietly confident of going over there, getting a win. Look, it's amazing, really. I think Northampton, off the top of my head, are in 6th in the Premiership, but they have the worst defensive record in the league, which is amazing, really, out of 11 teams. They conceded 40-odd points in La Rochelle last week, 6 tries. They conceded the most points and the most tries in the Premiership, so they have a very, very leaky defence, and I think that's why Munster have picked the team that they have. It's the equivalent of in football, Johnny, picking 3 up front, it's a bit of a gung-ho approach. Yeah. That is hugely encouraging, because like I said, it just wouldn't have happened in the previous era. So on the flip side, Northampton are a very, very good attacking team. They'll want to play at high tempo, so Munster slowing down their ball at the ruck is going to be absolutely crucial, and they will be confident, I think, Northampton, of causing Munster problems as well, because of all that we speak about, the excitement around what Jack Crowley can do in attack at 12. He is pretty untested, you'd have to say, as an inside centre defensively. So you can imagine, Courtney Laws is back in that team. They have a tasty back row. He's going to have a lot of big ball carriers running down his channel. And with Joey Carberry at 10 and Jack Crowley at 12, they will think that they can get them at Munster defensively. But if Munster can slow down their ruck ball, not let them get into their high tempo, I think Munster have a very good chance here.
Where is Crowley in the Irish situation then going forward? Obviously he's normally a 10, but...
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful of, making out halves into jack of all trades. We've seen it happen so many times. Joey Carberry was for a while at Leinster, and Leinster will still say that his best position was fullback. A lot of people will still say now that is his best position, but he wants to play 10. He's quite clearly the second choice in the Ireland pecking order to Johnny Sexton. But Jack Crowley is an interesting one. We've seen it more recently with Kieran Frawley at Leinster. He's been playing 12 for Leinster, but Ireland see him as a 10. He was injured, and Jack Crowley came in and did really well for Ireland last month. So you want to get your best players in the pitch, and ultimately I don't really have a problem with that. What you don't want to happen is for a guy who could be potentially, in the long run, an Ireland out half, having been played all across the backline and not getting enough game time in out half, which is an unbelievably specialised position. So I think for now it works. It'll be interesting to see going forward against the bigger teams like a Leinster. I don't know if you'd see Jack Crowley playing 12 up against someone like a Robbie Henshaw. You know what I mean? I think that you can get away with it for certain games, and this might be one for the weekend. But Ireland rate him very, very highly. Andy Farrell rates him very highly. That's why he trusted him starting the Australia game last month. And you had Ross Byrne coming off the bench. So the never-ending
number 10 is just unbelievable.
The never-ending narrative that is the Ireland out half story. There's a lot left to be running it yet.
Rugby and Off the Ball is with Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Obviously the Ulster La Rochelle game, there was obviously the doubt about where the game would go ahead and so on and so forth. What has happened with Ulster? The debacle of last week, their confidence seems to be half gone. Ronan O'Gara's coming over for, I think, his first game in Ireland as La Rochelle manager, under a bit of a cloud himself. Very interesting article by Ronan in the Irish Examiner today. This game is compelling in so many levels.
It's huge, yeah. It's probably the game of the weekend, you'd have to say, particularly when you add in the ROG factor. Yeah, look, Ulster in a dark place, you'd have to say. It clearly had a massive hangover last week going to Sale from what happened in the RDS the previous week.
Was that the 15 against 14, or what was it that did they come off thinking we blew this, because it was a hell of a reaction last week?
Yeah, well, they certainly did blow it. But like for the previous season, they won in the RDS. I think it was for the first time in 8 years. And you were kind of going then, wow, this could be a real turning point for Ulster, not just for their season, but in general, just over their mentality and their mindset, because there would have been question marks hanging over that. And then come the end of the season, they ended up beating Toulouse in Toulouse, but then lost the reverse game in Ravenhill. And it was just kind of the same old Ulster. And then come the end of the season, they lost against the Stormers over in South Africa at a time when Leinster had lost the night before to the Bulls, which meant that like their nemesis were basically out of the equation. And if Ulster had won in South Africa, they would have had a home final against the Bulls. And like it's not often Leinster are going to be out of the running in the URC. Like last year was just weird. They were suffering, I think, from the defeat that they had to La Rochelle in the Champions Cup final, another sort of hangover. So they really blew a missed opportunity then, and they'd started the season okay, but I still feel like how that played out at the end of the season is still hurting them.
Henderson back is massive.
Henderson back is massive, and so is John Cooney. They really missed those kind of guys last week. Like John Cooney is a guy, you know, he plays scrum half, but he almost plays out half as well. He takes it on a lot of the responsibility, much like a French out half does. Like Billy Burns has struggled, I would say, in a lot of big games for Ulster. So you need John Cooney more than ever. It's interesting to see Ulster playing Ian Henderson in the back row again. So
8 changes.
Yeah, 8 changes. It's not a surprise. Like Rory Sutherland coming back in will really beef them up as well, but in terms of looking for a team, of looking for a response, like La Rochelle are not the ones you want, particularly not when Ronan O'Gara is in charge and he's coming over absolutely not with a point to prove, but he's going to want to lay down a marker. Like you said, it's his first time coaching as a head coach back in Ireland. They're champions. They're not like other French teams who would be happy to send a second string team over and then, you know, beat them at home. Like this is a fully locked and loaded La Rochelle team who pose unbelievable threats to Ulster across the board.
Say the Ulster sort of demise continues, is McFarlane under pressure soon?
I don't know really. I think there's been a bit of an overreaction to what was an unbelievably bad defeat, and to get nilled as well. Like they obviously had the travel chaos in terms of getting there. Like I mean, I think that can be overplayed a little bit. And to be fair to Dan McFarland, he didn't try and use that as an excuse at all. I think plenty of other head coaches might have tried to use that. But look, people have short memories. Like you think back to the state that Ulster were in, like Brian O'Driscoll's called them a basket case. Well, yeah, people will always remember that, but lots of head coaches wouldn't have gone near Ulster at the time with everything that was happening on and off the pitch. Dan McFarlane came in, he's gotten the club in general back on track on the pitch as well, but there are still lingering doubts, I would say, around the mindset of the team. Their pack still looks, I don't think they have a heavyweight pack enough to go and win trophies. I think they're a little bit short. I think that's part of the reason why they're moving Ian Henderson back into the back row to try and get more big men onto the pitch. It allows them to play Sam Carter in the second row, who you'd have to say as well hasn't really set the world alight. Like he's one of their foreign signings. He hasn't really been great since he's come in either. Like they've got Stephen Kitchoff coming in, like unbelievable prop from South Africa next year, but that's next season, you know what I mean? So Dan McFarland is a very, very good coach, and I think he's done very, very good things with Ulster. They have a rotten draw, like I said. Like Munster going to Northampton, I think in their back-to-back games against them, they should really be targeting, I would say, 9 points, getting a win over there this weekend, and then potentially getting a bonus point win at home, because their interest levels could be seriously diminished by the time that comes around. Whereas that won't happen with La Rochelle at all. Like it's going to be very difficult. Even if Ulster were to beat them tomorrow, Johnny, it could be a turning point within their season, but you wouldn't have any faith at all in them going over to France in January and getting a win there either. And then they have Sale obviously to come to Belfast next month too. So
call it.
They're still just a Jekyll and Hyde team. Like, no, I think La Rochelle, like this La Rochelle team is awesome. Like we saw what they did to Leinster last season. So I'd be very surprised if La Rochelle didn't get a win.
Thank you, Cian.
Cheers, Johnny.
Yeah, and just a reminder that Monday Night Rugby and tonight's Wednesday Night Rugby are only available to listen back to in full exclusively on the OTB Rugby podcast feed. It's where you'll find Chris Jones discussing the sacking of Eddie Jones and the latest episode of The Red 78. Subscribe.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us.